He's also a storyteller, an educator, and an activist in a lot of the areas that are close to LEPOCO's heart. Peace and social justice, the environment, and other things. There's hardly anything that LEPOCO does that Reggie hasn't also done. So please join me in welcoming Reggie Harris to
Come gather round people wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, so you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone, for the time they are changing. Come writers and critics who prophesize with your pen, and keep your eyes wide, this chance won't come again. Oh, but don't speak too soon, for the wheel's still in spin, and there's no telling who that it's naming. For the losers now will be later to win, for the times they are changing. Senators, congressmen, please heed the call. Don't stand in the doorway, don't block up the hall. For the ones who get hurt will be fools who have stalled. There's a battle outside, it's raging. It'll soon shake your windows and rattle your walls. For the times they are changing. Curse it is cast. Slow ones now will later be fast. The present now, well, that's soon to be past. The order is rapidly fading, so the first ones now will later be last. For the time they are changing. Justice is done, that the fight against hatred is already won. Well, then open your eyes, 'cause it's only begun. It's a battle that's still worth the waging, and we'll never be free till we all rise as one, 'cause the times they are changing. Yes, the time I need you to turn to somebody next to you, across from you, with you, and say, I am so glad you're here.
So glad you're here.
And I ask you to do that tonight because the fact that you are here is no small thing. The fact that you chose to be here tonight with all of the other options that are possible, which includes, of course, doing absolutely nothing. The fact that you chose to be here and the fact that you are in this room because you are part of this organization, and this organization that for 57 years has been actively pursuing, advocating, and cooperating for peace and justice. The fact that you, however it is that you came to be part of this organization, chose to show up tonight is no small thing in a world that we now experience as being distracted and apathetic and angry. The fact that you are here tonight to celebrate and affirm peace and justice in this climate of hate, in this climate of selfishness and greed is no small thing. And I am here tonight to affirm you and to say that I am so very impressed, not in a small way, of all that I read of LEPOCO's work over those 57 years. So I'm going to ask you just in this moment to give yourselves and everyone who has made those 57 years possible a round of applause. And I will tell you that I am deeply privileged to be here tonight. I wish in so many ways that I could know each of your stories, because story is so important. Story is the foundation on which we as human beings connect with ourselves, with each other, and with our world. I've been spending, since January, an awful lot of time back in schools. And a lot of my time in schools is spent singing with children of all ages, even the high school ones who think they're too cool. And particularly telling stories and eliciting stories from young people. And then helping them to take a look at stories that exist from the past. Yesterday I was in two schools in Jamestown, New York. It was part of the Chautauqua education outreach that has been going on for about 10 years. And I was invited there to meet with teachers and then finally to go into classrooms to introduce them to the Underground Railroad. Well, actually, they'd already been introduced to the Underground Railroad. I'd sent materials before, and also it's part of the curriculum. This is a wonderful thing. There are places, of course, in our land where, well, you know. So it's been a very interesting time to be a musician and an artist and an activist going into the schools. Because when I go in, I'm talking about justice and peace issues. And as I travel around the country, I'm finding myself in states like North Carolina, Georgia, Louisiana last week, New York this week, but this week I'll be on my way to Alabama. And the thing that I'm just so really thrilled about is the fact that as I knew that I was coming here, I went on your website and I wanted to see what your story was. And so as I said, I am fascinated by story because I come from a community that celebrates a number of stories, both in word and song, that are the very reason that I'm here tonight. And I realize that Human beings are hardwired for story and song. There's research to back that up. We are fascinated and we are tied into the fact that we have been part of traditions that go back for thousands of years. Now, we are encouraged often in our present world to pay less attention to those things. As somebody said, most of the time people are interested in things that were 5 minutes ago. But the fact of the matter is, as we all know, if we don't know from which we've come, then we have no real credible idea of what it is we're doing in the present or why we're doing it. And we certainly have no real sense of what our future is. And it makes leadership and it makes citizenship very difficult. So I went on your website and I saw that for 57 years, you have been busy. For 57 years, you've been gathering and planning and participating and supporting. You've been sponsoring. You've been doing concerts, lectures, anti-war demonstrations, retreats, seminars, sit-ins, marches, conferences. There have been programs of all kinds on community and national and international concerns. LEPOCO members have educated, leafleted, picketed, resisted, drawn up drafts, raised money, supported people, issues, and organizations. You have shown up, you've shown films, chained yourselves to doors, you've gotten arrested, you've had other people pay the bail, you've organized, you've lobbied, you've placed ads, answered phones, put on plays, held peace boutiques, sponsored phone-a-thons, bike-a-thons, lemonade-a-thons. You seem to have a very big fondness for lemonade. It was mentioned 3 times. You've maintained a peace chorus. You've supported cultural activities. You've supported and celebrated poetry and poets, artists and musicians. You brought attention to all manner of challenges to democracy. You've had yard sales, craft fairs, more lemonade, raised and delivered humanitarian aid, joined and championed relief efforts. You've worked to defeat candidates who threatened our people and our planet. You've taught and practiced nonviolence. Along the way, there has been writing and press mailouts and conferences and a host of other things, all with a mindset that issues and attitudes might be intractable, but that people often, though they can be intransigent, can change. That is extraordinary. That is leadership. And that is leadership in a way that, as I think about where we are as a nation and as a world, I think about how much we need people who are willing to step up and show up. Here we stand in the middle of a great divide. It's time to deliver, but we're taking sides. And those who might lead us have too much to hide, so the world is on fire again. There was a man who once told us the way we could be in a time of great sorrow and hatred meant free. If our better angels could guide us, said he, think of what good might be done. If we would stand up, we'll get through the night. We'll find some answers, we'll make it right. Justice will flow down, freedom will ring. Think of the good it will bring when we let our angels sing. Angels sing. There are voices that cry out, from deep in the soul. They've been there forever, they never grow old. They're hopeful and quiet, but we'll never hear them speak. We were shattered by fear. So let's stand in the middle, and what can we say? Let's start with compassion and keep it in play. Think it all over and we'll find a way, and we'll do what we know must be done. We got to stand up to get through the night. We'll find some answers, we'll make it right. Oh, justice will flow down, freedom will ring. Think of the good it will bring when we let our angels sing. Now we can spend our time just fussing about the politics, keep our heads in the sand. We don't see the sign, but the future's on the line. We gotta work as fast as we can. We got to stand up to get through the night. We'll find some answers, we'll make it right. Justice will flow down, freedom will ring. Think of the good it will bring. If we would stand up to get through the night, we'll find some answers, we'll make it right. Justice will flow down, freedom will ring. Think of the good it will bring when we let our angels sing. Yeah, we got to stand up. Hey, we got to stand up. Hey, we got to stand up and let our angels sing. We have to stand up. And when we stand up, what is it we're going to do? Well, in some small way, oh, thank you very much. In some small way, yeah, that's activism. In some small way, we are finding our way to allow our light to shine. And my mother tells me that this was the very first song I ever sang. I know, I had to take her word for it. But I was 3 years old, she said, and they were in the house, and she and my sister apparently were singing the song, and I chimed in. And those things became part of our weekly routine, really. From the time that I can remember, song has been part of my life. And I mentioned in the title of this talk that the role of community and culture to forming relationship to what we do in the world has been very evident to me before I realized that it was evident. And it came through song. I talk to young people about culture. Usually when I'm talking about the Underground Railroad, or I talk about the Civil Rights Movement, I'm trying to show them that most of the movements, certainly in this nation, but around the world, have utilized song and cultural references because it is the way in which we connect mind, body, and spirit to what it is we're working on. And so we talk about the fact that people, regardless of what you do to them, regardless of how you oppress them, regardless of how you restrict them, what they have learned in their sense and their experience of culture, and their experience grounds them, they will not forget. One of the prime examples is my own ancestors who were taken captive in Africa and stripped and put on slave ships with absolutely nothing for the most part. Maybe a loincloth, maybe not. Naked and stripped, and with the exception of perhaps a gourd banjo or something that was brought on board by mistake. They came naked, but they were not naked. And we as human beings all have history, culture, and tradition. And those things stay with us. We are grounded in them, and they help us to create a lens through which we see the world. So for me, it was music that really began to open my eyes to the possibility that was beyond 3714 North 17th Street in Philadelphia. Now, the fact of the matter is, this song comes out of a people who, on most days, did not understand that they had a light that they could shine because of the danger, difficulty, and oppression of slavery. And yet, somehow they remember, well, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Well, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Well, this little light of mine, well, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Now, I already see some of you tapping your fingers or moving your head. But I'm gonna tell you right now, if this was a black audience, they'd be singing already. That would be part of that culture. I'm gonna bring it up because I feel like the basses didn't have enough room there. Well, this little light of mine, you say. Well, now this little light of mine. Well, this little light of mine. Well, let it, oh, let it shine, let it shine. Well, now all around this world. Well, now all around this world. Well, now all around this world. I said, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Well, working for peace and justice. Well, now working for peace and justice. Well, working for peace and justice. Well, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. I and all of us have been the beneficiary of elders. And one of my elders, somebody who certainly was so amazingly responsible and accountable for the Clearwater revival, Pete Toshi Sr. Pete loved this song. I believe he actually probably learned it first when he went into the South to work on issues of oppression and voter rights and segregation. But you know, Pete was a songwriter. He loved the simplicity of the song that says, way down in my heart, I'm gonna let it shine. Well, way down in my heart, I'm gonna let it shine. Well, way down in my heart, I'm gonna let it shine. Well, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Let's sing that chorus. Take this little light of mine. Well, this little light of mine. Well, this little light of mine. Well, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. But you know, as a songwriter, he just couldn't let that go. He had to write some words to add to that very simple song. I don't know whether he actually thought that the message didn't fully get through, or maybe he was just so brimming over with excitement and joy at what that song was saying that he wanted to communicate it in a different way. But this is what he said. Well, the light that shines church. Well, some say it's dark and we cannot see. Love lights the world for you and me. Some say turn around and just go high. We have the power to change the tide. Some call life a sad old story. We see a world that's bound for glory. The real power is yours and mine. Let your little light shine. Say this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. Whoa, this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. Well, this little light of mine. Well, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, 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 let it shine. One more time. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Hold fast to dreams, for when dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly. Hold fast to dreams, for when dreams go, life is a barren field frozen with snow. With billowing sails, the galleons came, bringing men and dreams, and women and dreams. Heart to heart, hand to hand, together we began to build this land. Some were free hands, seeking a greater freedom. Some indentured hands, hoping to find their freedom. Some were slave hands, guarding in their hearts the seed of freedom. But one word was there always, and that word was freedom. In that poem, Langston Hughes, interestingly, does not address those who were already here. And yet, in the context of his charism, he understood that the inequality in this land was present from the very beginning, and he addresses that in so many different ways in his work. I had the opportunity in a few schools to work with students on the Harlem Renaissance. And it was in that time following the Harlem Renaissance, actually, only by 15 years or so, that I was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I was born into a family that had done what so many black families did from about 1900 until about 1968. They were part of the Black Migration. And my relatives, my grandmother and grandfather, came north from Virginia. They, like 6 million other African Americans, were fleeing the South. And of course, we all know why they were fleeing. But so much of our nation and so much of the attitude and the hope and promise of the black community was centered in war. One of the ways in which African Americans have tried time and time again to prove that we belong has been to fight in every war that America has had. And it is both held up as a sense of triumph, a badge of courage, while it is certainly, in a global scale, one of the issues that make advocating for peace in the black community so difficult. If you're constantly building and trying to prove your worth, then you're going to take any opportunity that you can. And of course, part of that was fighting for their own freedom, because we know that from the very time of slavery, 1619 on, people were in a war on a daily basis for their lives. And yet, when wars came, our communities went to serve with vigor. I grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Edison High School, which was not a high school I went to, but it was only about 7 or so miles from my house. They contributed the most young men from any high school in the United States. There were clearly people who were sending those boys into the Vietnam War. And of course, all of my uncles and my dad and all, they all served in the armed forces. I was probably the first male in my family not to serve. And I was just lucky. Because at the time that my draft number came up, I didn't know anything about anti-war anything. I do, however, remember that on the day that the papers came out that were posting the numbers for the draft, I was very, very interested in finding out what my number was. I don't recall how I knew. Well, I knew actually because several members of my church had gone to Vietnam, and they had come back, fortunately alive, but 2 of them were mere shells of themselves. And I think looking at those young men who, before they went, were just absolutely vibrant and stellar leaders in our youth corps, and suddenly I'm looking at them having experienced something in some place in the world, and I see that they are no longer even able to function. So when my number came up, number 366, I said, hallelujah. But the lessons were there actually even before that. Because we've been wading through the water for years and years, but in the Civil War, a song came into being from those who were weary of this senseless battle. Black soldiers sitting around campfires, singing, down by the riverside, I'm gonna lay my burden down. Down by the riverside, I'm gonna lay my burden down. Down by the riverside, I'm gonna lay my burden down. Ain't no study war no more. Down by the riverside, I'm gonna put down my sword and shield. Down by the riverside, I'm gonna put down my sword and shield. Down by the riverside, I'm gonna put down my sword and shield. Ain't no study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war Ain't gonna study war no more. And indeed, we are in a time, we have always been in a time when studying war means making lots and lots of money. And our community, well, in trying to also prove its existence, has been at the forefront of those who are trying desperately to convince people that they need to connect with communities, are in a relationship from community to community. Cornel West, the amazing theologian and scholar and professor, has said often that because of the experience of African Americans here, that we have been trying desperately to teach the rest of America about community, to teach them about love and forgiveness. He talks about the fact that we, as a nation, have been mostly made accountable to our own creeds by those that we have oppressed. And as we look around us now and we see a nation that is struggling with a culture war, as we see a nation that needs, as Malcolm X would say, more light about each other. Malcolm X said, we need more light about each other. For light brings understanding. Understanding brings patience. Patience brings love. Love brings unity. We need more light about each other. Cornel West also says, we must realize that true and lasting social change comes from the presence of relationship and love. We have to recognize that there cannot be relationships unless there's a commitment to loyalty, patience, love, persistence. Because love is what justice looks like in public. We need more light about each other. But I stand in a room tonight with people and an organization that has committed itself. And maybe you don't think of it as love when you're standing on that corner or when you're planning that camp or when you're doing any of the other opportunities for mirroring justice and peace in our world. But when it comes down to it, the only way you could do what you have done and are doing is if you truly recognize the humanity of those around you. And in the work that I've been doing over the last 40, 45 years, I will tell you that I started out as a musician very much in the same way most musicians start out. We love music, we love what we do, and then we see some opportunity there to do something that will lift us up. At least in terms of musicians who are looking to be performers. It's a very odd thing to choose to do. To actually travel around the state, the country, the world, get on a stage night after night and ask people to like you. How bizarre is that? And to... Well, thank you very much. I will tell you that when I met Kim Harrison, Kim Richards then, and we got married and we started traveling around the world and the country, my only real desire was to be lifted up. I mean, I loved what music did and does for me, but the culture tells us that the important thing is to have people look at us. For us to shine and perhaps get rich and famous. That's worked out real well. I am so grateful in the 40 years that I have done this, 45 years, getting close to 50. I am so grateful that organizations like the People's Music Network and the Children's Music Network and the Kennedy Center Education Department and Clearwater and so many others, the Living Legacy Project that I joined in 2010 just to get one gig of doing music on a bus that has become a life mission now that I'm not only the musical education director, but somehow I allowed them to elect me co-president. I am so grateful that this music that came into my heart and my head and my body at age 3 has been the transformational vehicle through which I now see the lens of what I do as the opportunity to build community, to share light, and to work diligently for peace and justice. And that has come about in ways that I cannot even explain in the time that we have. But I will tell you this, you will be the first to know this. Over the course of the pandemic for me was a real opportunity to do several different things. It took all of us off the road. It gave all of us an awful lot of time. And in that time, I began to have a Sankofa moment. How many of you have heard of Sankofa before? Okay, how many have not? Quite all right, that's why we're here. Sankofa is a term that comes from Ghana. It's from the Akan people. And it means to go back and get what might have been forgotten. And to bring it forward. It's part of living in and through the story. I've had so many Sankofa moments in this journey of discovery. And they have brought me to a place where I am happy to say that I fully understand, and I'll learn more tomorrow, I fully understand the power that comes from the connections of community and the connection of merging our cultures with the relationships that drive us forward. And some of that, I will tell you, has landed in a book, which 3 days ago was approved for publication by Skinner Books. It is as yet untitled, but it is a memoir of my journey and how I've come to be here. But I'll share this song with you because it comes directly out of all of those lessons that I have learned of seeking light and listening to the elders. And the pandemic for me became a Sankofa moment where I went back to once again take a look at what the elders were saying. I will share these words of one, Maya Angelou. History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again. Lift up your eyes upon the day breaking for you. Give birth again to the dream. Women, children, men. Take it into the palms of your hands. Mold it into the shape of your most private need. Sculpt it into the image of your most public self. Lift up your hearts. Each new hour holds new chances for new beginnings. Do not be wedded forever to fear, yoked eternally to brutishness. The horizon leans forward, offering you space to place new steps of change here on this fine day, you may have the courage to look up and out upon me, the rock, the river, the tree, your country. No less to Midas than the mendicant. No less to you now than the mastodon then. Here on the pulse of this fine day, you may have the grace to look up and out and into your sister's eyes, into your brother's face, and say simply, very simply, with hope, good morning. We sit alone together, each from our different worlds, suspicious of each other, position flags unfurled. So much lies broken between us, lines of connection now, standing in ruins of pain and mistrust, searching for common ground. So we stumble through our points of view, logic falls apart. In that moment of confusion, we see a place to start. Through the windows of life, we sit in silence and wonder, where do we go from here? Frustration dragging us under, no resolution clear. We feel the anger, this desperation to turn this world around. Each of our faces a mirror, searching for common ground. So we lower our defenses, watch them fall apart. In that moment of confusion, we see a place to start. Through the windows of high. So we lower our defenses, watch them fall apart. In that moment of communion, we see a place to start. Through the windows of Let me hear you say hallelujah. Hallelujah. Hallelujah for the 57 years that this organization has been working and staying in the struggle. Let me hear you say hallelujah. Hallelujah. Hallelujah for all those who are no longer with us, but who did exactly what they were supposed to do. They did their part. In 2000, yeah, go ahead. In 2015, my organization, the Living Legacy Project, we had a conference that we put on in Birmingham, Alabama. It was the 50th anniversary of the crossing of the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And some 70,000 people were coming to Selma, Alabama to cross that bridge. The day before, 17,000 crossed the bridge with President Obama. I did not get that invitation. None of us did. However, the next day we all went across. But on that Saturday night when President Obama and a number of dignitaries were going across the bridge, we were in Birmingham, Alabama, and we were blessed with the presence of C.T. Vivian. C.T. Vivian, a warrior for peace, for justice, for civil rights and human rights. He came to speak to us that night, and one of the things he really passionately, I think he was 81 at the time, he passionately, with a smile on his face and such clear love in his heart, he said, in the civil rights movement, we understood that we were not on our own going to win the battle. That is why we stayed in community. That is why we had mass meetings and got together to sing and to celebrate each other for what was going to happen when we went out on that street the next day or the next week. He said, but we knew that we had good leadership. We knew that we were accountable to each other. And we knew that we were working for love. He said, we were not working against hate. We knew it was there. But we understood that if we worked against constantly, that it would deplete our energy, and that eventually, and this was something that I also heard Reverend William C. Barber say, he said, if you focus too much on the negatives that you're trying to achieve, that you're working against, eventually there's the possibility you will become what you hate. And so we focused ourselves on love and on relationships because we understood that people can change. And we were going to love them until they did. Well, looking back on that, it was a hallelujah night. It was a glory hallelujah night. And just a year later, I found myself sitting at an artist retreat in Florida. And I found myself, after the election of 2016, in a real quandary. I found myself focused completely on where the world was going wrong. And in the moment that I found myself there, I remembered Reverend Vivian's words. And in that moment, as I sat there thinking, what do I have to say to the world as an artist, as a musician, as a songwriter, as an activist? The words, glory, hallelujah, came to me. And I thought, what am I going to do with that? But I tell you, folks, these 57 years have changed the world. And we may not see in every way to the degree that we wish that it has. But every time I go into a school and I face those young faces, and I see their curiosity, and I see the issues that 10, 20, 30 years ago were absolutely and totally out of the possibility not to be won, I see that those young people are so far beyond those issues. And they are ready to move on. They are living glory, hallelujah. So those 57 years, I'm not going to wish you another 57. But I'm telling you this, the world has no idea you're coming. And we're going to celebrate every single day. Maybe on some days you won't feel up to celebrating fully. Take that day off. And join the party again on the next day. One of my favorite quotes came 2 years ago, from one of my favorite sheroes in the civil rights movement, Phronsie Brown Wright. We had her on one of our seminars, and you can go to livinglegacykilgrimage.org. If you go to livinglegacykilgrimage.org, you can not only find out about the pilgrimages that we do, but also you can see the seminars that we started doing when the pandemic began. And we have them all online. You can watch each and every one of them. The one with Phronsie Brown Wright at the end of our program, somebody said, do you ever get overwhelmed and just want to quit from all that you see around? We feel like we're going back. Do you ever just want to quit, just give up? And she said something to the effect of, honey, I quit this job every night. But in the morning, I remember that when I was 16 years old, I gave a promise to Medgar Evers and to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. that I would keep working for justice until I die. So I put my shoes on, I go back to work. Indeed, it's time for us all to put our shoes back on. Well, I'm sitting here thinking about the world today. Oh, glory, hallelujah. Got a lot on my mind to say. Glory, hallelujah, I'm ready to go. We're all living in a world turned upside down. Oh, glory, hallelujah. Gonna take some time to turn it around. Glory, hallelujah, I'm ready to go. Oh, mama, it's a long, long road. You got me singing with the seed you sowed. Something me, so come what may. Glory, hallelujah, it's a righteous day. Glory, hallelujah, I'm on my way. We got a world of trouble and a world of pain. Oh, glory, hallelujah. They keep spinning the truth in freedom's name. Glory, hallelujah, I'm ready to go. When the haters pull up, I just sing my song. Oh, glory, hallelujah. Keeps my mind on track, keeps my spirit strong. Glory, hallelujah, I'm ready to go. Oh, mama, it's a long, long road. You got me singing with the seed you sowed. Something me, so come what it may. Glory, hallelujah, it's a righteous day. Glory, hallelujah, I'm on my way. Well, I know I can't do this all by myself. Oh, glory, hallelujah. It's a long, hard journey, gonna need some help. Glory, hallelujah, I'm ready to go. Well, I'm sitting here thinking about the world today. Oh, glory, hallelujah. Got friends by my side, and I'm blessed to say, glory, hallelujah, I'm ready to go. Oh, mama, it's a long, long road. You got me singing with the seed you sowed. Something me, so come what may. Glory, hallelujah, it's a righteous day. Glory, hallelujah, I'm on my way. Bye.